I I truly feel honored in the invitation to stand before this magnificent audience. There isn't another like it in all the world that I know anything about, but I feel humble. I thank Brother Barrett very much for that lovely prayer and this chorus for their music and for your presence here and the presence of so many of these fine men and women who are devoting themselves to try and help you young people to achieve in life that which will make you eminently successful no matter where your lot is cast. Now, I've already met a few of my relatives that are here, and I think I have at least 3 grandchildren in this audience. If they're not here, they ought to be. And Brother Covey, who introduced me, his grandfather is my cousin, and my son is here. I don't hold that against any of them. Now, I understand today that I'm at liberty to sort of not be too formal. I like to talk to young people like I would if they were my children. And you know, I really could preach you a sermon on the Scriptures. If you don't believe it, read that book I wrote, A Marvelous Work and a Wonder, and then you'll know that I know a little bit about the Scriptures. But I thought today that I would like to choose as a sort of a text to what I'd like to say a little statement I read a few years ago, and you may have read it many times, from ex-President Herbert Hoover, called The Uncommon Man. It reads as follows. It is a curious fact that when you get sick, wait a minute, I'm starting at the wrong end. I guess that's where I ended. In my opinion, we are in danger of developing a cult of the common man, which means a cult of mediocrity. But there is at least one hopeful sign. I have never been able to find out just who this common man is. In fact, most Americans, especially women, will get mad and fight if you try calling them common. This is hopeful because it shows that most people are holding fast to an essential fact in American life. We believe in equal opportunity for all, but we know that this includes the opportunity to rise to leadership. In other words, to be uncommon. Let us remember that the great human advances have not been brought about by mediocre men and women. They were brought about by distinctly uncommon people with vital sparks of leadership. Many great leaders were of humble origin, but that alone was not their greatness. It is a curious fact that when you get sick, you want an uncommon doctor. If your car breaks down, you want an uncommon mechanic. When we get into war, we want dreadfully an uncommon admiral and an uncommon general. I have never met a father and mother who did not want their children to grow up to be uncommon men and women. May it always be so, for the future of America rests not in mediocrity, but in the constant renewal of leadership in every phase of our national life. I sit on the Appropriations Committee of the church funds, and the greatest thing in our budget is our educational contribution. And there's only one reason for that, and that is to try to make out of the youth of Zion uncommon men and women to bring them up to be leaders of men and women wherever their lot is cast. I feel, as I stand here today, that this is an uncommon institution. I think there's none other like it in all the world, as many testify who come among us even who are not members of the church. And I feel that I stand here in the presence of uncommon youth, you young people who have chosen to come here to prepare yourself to be leaders of men. And what the church has to give in this institution will be very helpful to you in making of you uncommon men and women in the world in which we live. Remember the little saying that to every man there openeth a way, and ways and a way. And some souls climb the highway, and others grope the low. And in between on the misty flat, the rest drift to and fro. But to every man there openeth a highway and a low, and every man decideth the way his soul shall go. This matter of making decisions and making proper decisions, particularly in youth, when you have your entire life ahead of you, is such an important thing. No one of you here today would want to be one that drifts about in the misty flat. You wouldn't want to walk the low road. You want to walk the high road. And in order to do that, you have to put forth a real effort in order to achieve that mark of leadership that will distinguish you in this world of educated men and women today. Remember the words of poet Longfellow. He said, heights of great men won and kept were not achieved by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. Success isn't handed to us on a silver platter. We have to work for it. You've heard this before, but Brother Wilkinson told us in one of our Board of Education meetings that by a national survey, it is indicated that a college graduate during the period of his lifetime, and this is averaged throughout the nation, earns $176,000 more than a high school graduate. I tell the students, if the going seems a little tough and the exams are difficult and you think you ought to drop out, just put a little plaque up on the wall, $176,000, and then look at it and ask whether it's worthwhile or not. There's no success achieved without the effort necessary to achieve it. Some years ago, I had a birthday. I've had a lot of them. My wife gave me for a birthday present a book written by Wiggins called The Marks of an Educated Man. She knew I needed it, and I did, so I read it. And there's a little story in there that appealed to me I'd like to relate to you. It told about a college professor from the agricultural college who went out into the farming locality to try and induce these young boys to attend the agricultural college. Well, in that community was Farmer John, who knew all about farming, and he boo-hooed the idea. He said, imagine a man going to college to learn how to farm. He says if he wants to farm, let him get out on the farm. But his boy listened to the professor, and he achieved the idea that he'd like to go to college, and he sold his mother on the idea, so you know what happened. Well, anyway, when he returned, the father said, now, my boy, you take half of the farm, and I'll take half of the farm, and we'll see who knows how to farm, the man from the college or the man from the farm. One morning, the father came in and he said, Ma, what are those boxes up in Son's window? Oh, she said, he's just testing his seed. The daddy says, a man who doesn't know seed when he sees it's no business on a farm. But when the crop was gathered in, the father had 60 bushel to the acre, and the boy had 90 bushel to the acre. I didn't think there's any place they raised that much, but I found that up in Idaho. Well, anyway, the next morning the father came down the steps dressed in his best bib and tucker and carrying his little traveling bag, and Ma said, "Where are you going, Pa?" He says, "I'm going to college." Well, now, there isn't any line in this world, no matter how much we know about it, that an education won't help us to do a better job. And so we have to realize that we have to pay the price for what we're going to get out of life. I want to read you a couple little statements. The man who sticks. You probably heard this. The man who sticks has his lessons learned. Success does not come by chance. It's earned by pounding away, for good hard knocks make stepping stones of the stumbling blocks. He does not expect by a single stride to jump to the front. He is satisfied to do every day his level best and let the future take care of the rest. For the man who sticks has the sense to see he can make himself what he wants to be if he'll off with his coat and pitch right in, 'cause the man who sticks can't help but win. Now this says that the man who sticks can make of himself what he wants to be. While I was president of a state down in California, we had a little slogan that goes like this: not failure, but low aim is often our greatest sin. It isn't that we have tried and failed so often as it is that we haven't tried. And then we had another little saying that goes like this: to arrive nowhere is to be going nowhere. That's where one arrives with utmost certainty, without the use of road signs, or without the signs. Now, if I missed that a little, but anyway, you know what I'm trying to tell you. But if we don't have a goal in life, if we don't know what we want to make of ourselves, then we're not likely to achieve the objective. And the first requisite is to decide what we want to make of ourselves. Remember the little story about the man who went to Oberlin College, and when the man who was showing him what he'd have to learn and what his course and curriculum should be, he said, "Isn't there a shorter course?" The man said, "Oh, yes." He said, "Just depends what you want to make of yourself." He says, when the Lord starts out to make an oak, He takes 100 years for it. But when He wants to make a squash, He does that in 6 months. I don't think any of you would like to be a squash. Now, I have another little statement here I'd like to read to you. The man who wants a garden fair, or small or very big, with flowers growing here and there, must bend his back and dig. The things are mighty few on earth that wishes can attain. Whate'er we want of any worth, we've got to work to gain. It matters not what goal you seek, its secret here reposes. You've got to dig from week to week to get results or roses. Now I like that thinking, because after all, we have to pay the price for what we want to get in life. When I was down in the South, I met a Dr. Sutton down there. He's talked in the Tabernacle in Salt Lake a number of times on in educational meets. He is an educator, and he made this statement. He said, "If I had my way, we would never give a man a doctor's degree in college." He said, "We make them doctors. Doctors of what? doctors of memorization. He says, I would wait until they get out and prove that what they got in college distinguished them and made leaders of them in the field in which they have prepared themselves. And I like that. I'm a great believer in a round man in a round hole and a square man in a square hole, and I think many misfits there are in the world. So I think one of the first requisites ought to be to decide what you're adapted for and then go out to win and to get the top. There's always more room on the top of the ladder than there is down at the bottom. This same Dr. Sutton told about when he was 15 and his father told him it was time for him to decide what he'd like to be in this world and gave him a few professions that he might consider. So he said he gave them consideration, and he thought of the minister in his community and how the minister lifted people up with his sermons and how they loved that minister, and he thought it would be wonderful to be a minister. Then he thought of being a doctor and how the doctors with their operations relieve pain and suffering and extend the lives of people, and he thought it would be wonderful to be a doctor. And then he thought of being an architect and how wonderful it would be to draw plans and see your buildings grow to the heights and be able to drive by and know that it was the result of your own brain and your own thinking. And he thought it'd be wonderful to be an architect. And then he thought of being a writer and how writers sway the thinking of men and nations and people. And he thought it'd be wonderful to be a writer. And then he thought of the beautiful golden ears of corn that his father raised and thought it would be wonderful to be a farmer. And then he said, being a prayerful man, he said, I got down on my knees and something seemed to say to me, why not be them all? Be a teacher, and your students will preach your sermons for you. They'll perform your operations for you. They'll write your books for you. They'll build your buildings for you. They'll raise your corn for you. So he decided to be a teacher. Well, now you may not all want to be teachers. I wouldn't be a good teacher. I don't know how to do it. But anyway, the thing is that we ought to decide what we want to be in our youth and then stick to it and try and make a success of it. When I graduated from the grade schools out in my little country town, that's the only thing I ever did graduate from. But we didn't even have a high school out there in those days, and the days are different now than they were then. The principal of the school had me write a little prognostication on the graduating class. If you don't know that big word, that means a prophecy of what become of them. Well, now that's 65 years ago or more, and now I look back at that class, and I think of what they've achieved and how nearly I came to prophesying what had become to them. And then I realize that it isn't just what you get in school that determines what's going to become of you, but it's what you do with what you get in school after you get out of the school. And then I ran on to this little saying, I know you've heard this before, called the way of the world. This man put it the same kind of an experience in a little better words, I'm sure, than I did to the graduating class I mentioned. He said, oh, where are the playmates of yesterday, the fellows we knew at school? Oh, what has become of the studious one? And where, oh, where is the fool? Oh, what has become of the orator whose passion was to recite, and the bashful kid who would speak no peace unless he succumbed to fright? Oh, what has become of the model boy who was always the teacher's pet? I wasn't that boy. Oh, where is the tough young nut, the one we can never forget? Now, here's the answer to the query. Now this shows you that it takes more than what they got in school. It's how they adapt themselves after they get out of school. The studious one, so we have been told, is driving a hack these days, while the fool owns stock in a bank or two and a railroad that always pays. The orator that we knew so well is a clerk in a dry goods store, while the bashful kid we knew has been in Congress 10 years or more. The model boy, I don't like this one, but I'll read it to you. The model boy is behind the bars for stealing a neighbor's cow. And you ask, what of the tough young nut? Oh, he's the bishop now. Now you never can tell. If you could just live ahead 65 years and look back and see the neighbors and the friends and the relatives that you've gone to school with and see what they were then and what they'll be in 65 years, I think you'd realize the importance of making decisions at this time that will carry you over and make you uncommon among your associates wherever your lot will be cast. Now, we're proud of our young people. We know they're uncommon. We hear such wonderful reports of them. During the war, particularly, we got so many reports of their achievement and their outstanding acts that brought credit to them, that it's been a great thing. President McKay said in one of our meetings of the 12 and the presidency in the temple here a short time back, he said he believed that our young people today are better than they have ever been. I like that thinking. I have confidence in our youth. I think most of them are going to walk the highway. I think most of them are going to be uncommon. And I think that's why you're all here at this school today. I received a letter from a missionary down in California. What time am I supposed to go? 10 minutes to? I received a letter from a missionary down in California during the war. He was there with his wife, and he wrote this. He said, there have been so many Mormon boys here in uniform, and they've been such outstanding young fellows. He said they've turned the feelings of the people of this town favorable toward the Mormon church. And now you see, they were uncommon boys. And then he told this specific story. I've told this before. You may have heard it. He said that one of the women's clubs was putting on a luncheon at the hotel, and she had an extra, the lady in charge had an extra plate placed at the table, and she said, when the next soldier comes along, we'll invite him to occupy this plate at the table. Well, he happened to be a Mormon boy, and he didn't hide his light under a bushel. Like Jesus said, we should let our light so shine that the world, seeing our good works, should glorify our Father in heaven. When they passed the coffee around, he didn't touch the coffee. You see how easy it would have been for that boy to have said, oh, shucks, Mother isn't here, Father isn't here, my bishop isn't here. I'm the only man with all of these women here. What a little cup of coffee won't hurt me. But he had to show forth the praises of the Lord who'd called him out of darkness into this marvelous light, and he wouldn't touch it. They offered to get him tea, and he didn't want that. Well, then they wanted to know all about him, and that opened the door where he could tell them about how he was raised. And then when they were through, they lighted their cigarettes and passed them around. Shame on the women. They wouldn't, none of you do that. Well, anyway, right there, one of those women said, I resolved that if the Mormon elders ever called at my home, I'd let them in. I wanted to know more about a people who could raise a boy like that boy who sat at our table that day. And when that letter was written, she was a very earnest investigator, and that's how we got the story. I told that story one day up in the assembly hall. At the close of the meeting, a young man came up and he said, Bishop, I'm that boy. I said, no kidding? He says, no, sir. I said, what are you doing in the church now? Oh, I'm bishop of such and such a ward over here. You see, the Lord knows them when they can be trusted. President McKay so often says that to be trusted is better than to be loved. Now, we had one of our Mormon boys in the service. They sent him east to an officer's training school. And a new commanding officer came in to the camp, and they put on a banquet to entertain him. And there by every plate was a cocktail glass. Now, I don't really know what a cocktail is. I've heard about them. I hope none of you know about them. And when the proper time came, every one of those potential officers stood up with their cocktail glass to toast that incoming officer. All but one boy. And he raised a glass of milk. And the officer saw it. Take a little courage, wouldn't you think, to sit there with all those upcoming officers and see all of those cocktail glasses come up and stand up and raise up a glass of milk? Well, the officer saw it too. And he made a beeline for that boy after the entertainment was over. He said, why did you toast me with a glass of milk? Well, officer, he said, I've never touched liquor in my life. My parents wouldn't want me to touch it. I didn't think you would, and I wanted to toast you, so I thought you'd be satisfied if I toasted you with what I'm accustomed to drinking. He says, you report at headquarters in the morning and told him what time. Now, I suppose that boy spent a sleepless night, but when he went in that officer's quarters the next morning, you know what happened? The officer assigned him a place on his staff with this explanation. I want to surround myself with men who have the courage to do what they think is right, regardless of what anybody else thinks about it. Isn't that wonderful? That was an uncommon boy, wasn't it? I hope you're all uncommon. I hope if you ever sit in a situation like that, you'll make a proper decision. I shouldn't do this, but I'd like to just tell you one little experience of my own along that line. When I was a young fellow out on the old Salt Air Beach Dance Hall, when that was reckoned to be the finest dance hall in all America, one of my girlfriends came up and she said, Legrand, we're having a banquet downstairs. Wouldn't you like to join us? Now, you know the old saying that the way to a man's heart's through his tummy. I couldn't turn that one down. So we took hold of hands and went hopscotching down those steps over to the north end of that eating hall until we approached a long table that was all spread, and by every plate was a tall beer bottle like they used to have in those days. And as soon as I could see that that's where we were headed for, I stopped just like I was shot. And I looked at that table, and I looked at that girl. There I was, a hold of her hand. She said, what's the matter? Are you too good to drink a little beer? Now, you know, if you got a hold of a girl's head, you got to think pretty fast when she talks to you like that. And I had to think fast. And I said, well, Elsie, I guess I am. I thought you were. Goodbye, I said, and I went up those steps a lot faster than I came down. Now, you know, I've asked myself time and time again, do you suppose that you would ever become the presiding bishop of this church to preside over all the boys of the Aaronic priesthood in the entire world if you'd have sat down at that table that night and taken your bottle of beer? You know, if you never take the first one, you never need to worry about the second one. And I suppose if I'd have taken the first, it'd have been a lot harder to turn them down next time, and I'd have been grouped with that group, and you know the rest. Well, now, we have to, I could tell you some more, but I want to tell you one for the girls now. I got a half a dozen here, but there's time for that. I was down in California here a couple of years ago, and I met a young lady at the Relief Society Bazaar. She came up here to the Y. She was the daughter of one of the families that I preside over as their stake president. And this is her story. She started keeping company with a young man up here who was a member of the church, but he wasn't active in the church. And so when he got serious and proposed to her, she said, "I'll never marry a man who doesn't honor his priesthood and do his duties in this church." She said, "I'm going to be able to point to my children and say, 'You follow your father.'" He wasn't willing to pay the price. So their courtship ended right there. She was an uncommon girl. And then in a short time she started keeping company with another young man, and finally they were engaged, and the engagement was announced in the newspaper, and a friend of the first suitor sent a copy of the paper to the first suitor back in Chicago. And when he read it, he called this girl up all the way to Los Angeles. He said, "I can't live without you. If you call off that engagement and give me another turn," he said, "I'll promise you that I'll do anything and everything you ever asked me to do in the church." An uncommon woman. Well, when I met them, he is a counselor in the bishopric, and I've checked on him since. He's now the bishop of his ward. Don't you admire a woman that has courage like that? Well, now, I can't take time. I just tell you one more short one, and then I'll quit. Young man called me up one day, and he said, "Brother Richards, is this Bishop Richards?" "Yes, sir." "Well, I'm in trouble." I says, "What's your trouble?" He says, "I've been keeping company with a girl for 3 years, and now she heard you speak the other night, and now she won't go out with me anymore." I said, "Why won't she?" And he said, "Because I'm not active in the church." I said, "Good for her. I'm glad to know that there's at least one girl in Israel who listened to an old man like me. Now, what are you going to do about it?" He says, "What can I do about it?" I said, "Get active in the church and then go back." He says, "How can I?" I said, "You go talk to your bishop. If he doesn't help you, you come back to me and I will." He's never been back. So I reckon he got active in the church. Now, God bless each one of you and help you to make the decisions in your youth that'll truly make you uncommon in the world, and this, the Church of Jesus Christ, which is the greatest movement in all the world, and I bear you that witness, and pray God to bless each one of you individually in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.